Right. Let's start. So under the today's topic, we are going to look at focus on style sheets. Especially, we focus on the presentation of the documents. Now, HTML we have used in the in previous sessions to mainly discussing how to structure the content, and in CSS we can talk about how to present it. And nowadays, since we have different devices, the same content we can view in different devices. CSS can be effectively used uh, that to represent your content, right? Now, the main benefits that we have discussed is mainly you can reduce the amount of work that you have to put in, and then more accessibility for different shape and sizes uh, of uh, the screens that you will have, when then you can present the work depend on different screen sizes and so on. The main syntax that we have discussed, usually we will have what we call the selector, and then we have some declarations. So the declarations are separated with semicolons, and usually within curly brackets, we will put up different properties and values. Now, for example, in this example given here, we are changing how H1, the level 1 header, we are changing the color into blue and font size into 12 pixels. So this is how we can actually basic syntax of CSS. Now, when it comes to selectors, we can use elements, which is level 1 header H1, paragraph P, and so on. Then there are special selectors we use, ID selector. Especially, we can use this for a very specific element, like, para 1 is one ID selector here. We will use, in this particular case, you can see in this paragraph, para 1, we will align, text align into center, and we set the color into red, which is where uniquely you can specify the style. Now, similarly, when you have to do it for many cases, we can define what we call the class selectors. Now, when we define class selectors, that we can have several elements within a very specific class. Let's say we want to center something, so we can have a class center with a dot here. We make it align into center with the colors set into red. And then we can say, okay, for example, here the P class, and we can say, okay, it's a center. Now, similarly, you can have like multiple classes also you can refer. So, for example, in this here, we have P, and then classes comes from two classes. Center is one of the classes, the large is another class. So that is class selector. And then, since you can use class for many elements, sometimes you can specifically talk about a particular element with that particular class. So we can say selecting specific element affected by a class. So for example, when we have paragraph with class center, so please class center in that particular case, so how you are going to handle it. So this is another selector that we can use to change the content. Right. Now, this is the basics that we wanted to talk about. And, when you are writing rules, so these are known as particular rules. You can comma, we have a semicolon to separate different sets. And each one, as you can see, we can see properties and values. So only thing is we should know like what we have to have there, what properties we can use them. Right. Okay. So now when it comes to the data that we have, so last time we did couple of programs. So for example, CSS1, let me just open it up, that CSS which we have discussed the last time. And then also it's, let me open Notepad also. Right now we have done one. Okay, let me open up the screen. Right now, let me share both of that. So right now we have so hope you can see. So last time we discussed a couple of ideas of how we may change styles. I'll come to that again later on, and we have very specific example on how to change the background. One is setting an image using background image, and then so usually when you put up an image into the background, usually it will repeat so that it will fill the background, but that can be changed in CSS rule using the property background repeat, and then you can say repeat only X direction. So that's one of the things that we have discussed. Yeah, so a couple of things we have already done. So for example, we done previously different structural changes we have done. So today basically we can talk about how CSS could be used to improve this, right? Okay, so let's go back to the slides again. Now that we have talked about the selectors, there are other things that we can also talk about. If you have the same set of rules for different selectors, you can actually combine them. This is known as grouping selectors. Similarly, we also discussed how to have comments, especially comments are represented using splash and a star, and within that you can have single line comment, and very same thing you can use it to expand it to multi-line comments as well. Then we discuss about the insert in CSS. Basically, we can use it several ways. One is as a external style sheets, which is very useful, especially when you are creating a website and when you want to refer the same styles for all the web pages. The best way would be to put it to a separate CSS file. So in this case, my style CSS, which, and then we have this statement we included within the header so that you can actually use this. Similarly, then if you want to have it as an internal style sheets, you can use style tag. Within the style tag, you can define the set of rules in CSS. Right. The next one is usually when you have the HTML tag, within that you can use the style attribute where you can create a set of CSS rules, which is called inline style. So you can see that we have different options, and now you might be wondering like why we have these different ways of using CSS. Right now, when you have multiple style sheets, then usually, see, if you are using the same selector, let's say you are using H1 in different style sheets, whatever you use at the end will be used. Right now, for example, let's look at in the example, we have external style sheet, and within the style sheets, let's say we have color is navy, that is blue color, one of the variations of blue color. And within the style, let's say you have internal style sheets within the style, right? Now there, let's say we have the same selector, we are changing the color into orange. Now, when you have more than one style, then this is the order, and you can check that. First one, the priority start with the inline style whenever you will specify with the elements itself. And then depending on the order, you could use either external or internal style sheets, especially when you put up in the header section, or else finally it will be the browser default value. Right. Okay. So that actually you could try. So we can do a example later on. So I'm not going to discuss in detail like how it works, but I guess you could check that. Right. The next thing that we discuss is how to use colors in CSS, especially you can use it background color. So in that case, the property name will be the background color. And then the value, you can have, colors in names, colors in as a hex value, or colors in RGB value. So all the three styles are possible. Now, if you're wondering how to get this, name, you can directly find what are the HTML color names, and usually you will get the color name. And if you want, you can have a hex value as well. So these color names you can directly call within the code, or else you can specify using hex color. Now, if you're wondering like if you need like some customized color, it is always possible that you use either Photoshop or Paint, and within that you can get the hex value for any color that you want to put it into a page, right? So the background color property is to set the background color. The text color is to set the text color. Then you can specify border color. Now, for example, here we are specifying border around H1, which is 2 pixels, and this is the line type. We are going to say that the border is a solid line, and this is the color, right? Border colors we actually look at later on. Now, for example, here you can see the borders. As we can say, we have solid border, you will have something like this. But then there are border styles like dotted, dash, double, groove, breach, insert, outset, none, hidden. And then you can even combine multiple. For example, here, the 4 sides we specify. Top we have dotted. Then the left and right we have dash and the solid, right? So you have, then you have double. Likewise, you can actually change the borders. Right, now we talk about the color information. So here when we say border, we specify it's a 2 pixel border, the border width, and then the type of line that you are going to use, in this particular case solid, and then the color is tomato. Similarly, color values, you can use it different ways. So here is another way of using color, using RGB values, and also hex values. Right, quickly, maybe we can, make a slight change and see. Now, for example, if I'm going to get my previous example, where we have the colors. So you can see here, we specify the color as navy, and then the background color is light blue, right? So now, for example, let me put up a border here. So let's put up a border. So if you go back to the note, so the border is, we can say, but the border, and then you can specify width of, then, whatever the line type and the color. So we just start with the border, for example. I'm going to go back just to say border. So let's say 2 pixels and just save it. Let's refresh it. So let me save file, save, and refresh it. Then let's say solid. Let me save it, refresh it. So now you can see it's a solid one. You can change, for example, dashed. So if you remember, for example, the lines, we can have, we'll say dashed. So let me save it, refresh it. Now you can see you have a dash border around this. And then you can have color as well. So for example, if you can say red, so border color has changed. So this is how we may put it. And even you can have curvature, like, curved lines. So that I'll come again in, for example, let me go back. Now here is what we were discussing about the colors in color information. Now, when you talk about the color information can be, given in 3 ways, as we have already discussed. You can use color name and hex value, which represent red, green, and blue values. Now, for example, if I'm going back to my here again, so let me have another, let's say H2 CSS. So in here, let's say we are going to talk about, let's say CSS, cascading style, sheets, let's say with /H2. Let me save it. Let me refresh it. Yes, so you can see the color. So it's just blank. That's the default color we have. So now let me write some rules. H2. So yeah. So one of the things now, for example, now color information. Color information, you can use a name, or let's red, green, blue value. So let me use hash. So hash, we have red, green, blue, where the values can go from 0 to 255. In that particular case, hex value will be 0 to FF. So let's say red R FF 0000. If I do this and if you refresh it, now you can see it's in red color. That is, RGB, this is red. So green, for example, if you say 00 FF, so that is green color. And similarly, if you put 00 FF, sorry, FF, so refresh it, we'll get blue color, RGB values. So similar to this one, another way to represent the color is you can use RGB values. For example, here, sorry, in this particular case, you will see, we can say RGB, and then you can give the value in decimals, right? So let me put that one as well. So let me say background color. Right now, this is what we have. Okay, so background color. So let's say yellow. We do that. Let me, yeah. So you can see it's in yellow color. So to get yellow, right? So how do you get yellow in this particular case? So in hash code, maybe we can say red and green. So that means FF00. So if you refresh, we'll get the same color. Or else you can use RGB code like this. So we can see RGB, and then we can say, okay, RGB red is 255, red green is 255 or 0. So this is another way to represent the same color. So this is for you to understand how we can specify color in different ways. So you can use name, hex code, or you can use RGB code. So here we have the name, and then this is the hex code, and this is the RGB code, right? Now that's about color information, and then another thing that we would like to discuss is how we can actually make use of these conflicting styles, especially cascading. That is one of the things that we need to focus on when we work on, right? So especially when you have inline style sheets. So whether you are going to give it as a, now in this case, this is in internal style sheet. We put up everything within the style, but we can have a separate file if you want, right? So that can be put inside here, right? Let's move on to the note again. So the colors we have discussed, the color names, the background images we have actually discussed last time. Right now, yeah. So some more information now. Sometimes the background information you need to control. For example, the repetition. Earlier we say a repeat text if you want to repeat the background only horizontally. So let's say you just want to have the background. Then we can also say no repeat, which means we can decide where you want to keep. So here we will say no repeat, which means it will display only once. So if I go back into my code again, so the right now we say repeat X. So let's put no repeat. And then when you refresh, you can see in the background, we will have the background image only appear once. So that's what we call no repeat. Then similar to that, we can make it a position. Now, for example, where do you want to have your image in? in the background position is what we can use. For example, you can say right top, left center, left bottom, center top, center bottom. So let's put right top, for example, background position. So let's try with that. So we have to say background position. So we say, yes, here what we say, right top, right? We say right top. So refresh it. You can see it's in right top now. Maybe we can reduce the size. Okay, right top. It's in right top now. Let's say sometimes we need the image in the middle. So the command will be center. So if you do center, you can see when you refresh it, okay, it should come here. Center. Yes, shall we put what are the other values? Let me check. Okay, let's say center bottom. Let me check that one as well. Just to check. Let me save. Let me refresh it. Okay, so here is how it look like. Okay, so okay, maybe what I have right now is maybe I can put some text here. Let me check what if I have some text. So yeah, I'm going to copy from my previous ones. Yes, okay, so we have some text here. Just I will copy and then let me put as paragraphs /p. Let me put some values. Right now here I will refresh. Yes, now you can, it's very clear because earlier you will see that it appears to us. Okay, maybe let me put h3 /h3 and let me put paragraphs / yeah. So I put up some text here because sorry, yeah, I will remove this. Now it should clear now. Okay, now it's clear. So now maybe earlier when I put center, it was not very clear whether it's actually centered. So you can see now it's very clear that we have a control over how to put up the image together with the use of background position, the property. Right now that we have clear about this, let's go back. We'll discuss more on the next topic. Background, now we talk about many things together. We can actually put everything under one name. For example, we talk about background color, background image, whether to repeat, whether we are going to have some attachment, the position. So everything we can put into a single shortened code, which we call background. So this is what we call the shorthand property, where we can specify, background color, and then whether you are going to have image, whether you are going to have a repeat, the position, right? So everything we can put under the background. So this is called shorthand property. Now, for example, in this particular case, so you can see I put everything here. The body, we didn't put up any color here, but everything like in background. So instead of putting everything here, we can put into a single line, right? So how do you do this? So let me save this as a CSS2 just to make sure that we have, files to HTML, right? And then, so let's put everything together as background properties. So the point here is we can say background, and then we can combine everything together. So we have the URL, we have no repeat, and also the position. So this is called shorthand property, where we can put everything together like this. So let me save. Let me go back to my, okay, so here is CSS2. So you don't see any difference, but yeah, it's the same thing. So let's put up some color. Let's have, okay, green color. Let me put RGB. R is 0, G, FF 00. So in that particular case, when you refresh now, you can see. Okay, so now that we have put everything under background. So that means everything we put up into under the background, where you specify in this particular case background color, the image, whether to repeat, and also the position, right? So this is called shorthand property, which we have used. Okay, right, back to my note again. The borders we have already discussed. The property that you need to remember is what we call the border style. And then with the border style, we can talk about border width as well. Now, for example, width can be given it as a separate way. One thing is you can use in different sizes, in pixels, in points, in centimeters, and so on. And the first line which says, okay, the border width is 5 pixels. The second one, we will say border width is medium, like you can define like whether it's thin, medium, or thick. That is another way to talk about this. The third one is the border width. This is what we call top is 2 pixels. Then we have left 10 pixels. The right is 4 pixels. And then the bottom is, I guess it's the bottom, right? So the 20 pixels. Let me check quickly. Okay, top, right. Okay, sorry. It should goes like this. Top is 2 pixels. Then the right is 10 pixels. The bottom is 4, and then the left is 20. So that's how it goes, right? So that's how we specify the border widths. So let's quickly put up in our example. So here is what I have. The right now we have some borders. Okay, where we have borders. Right now, let me see. So here we have border 2 pixels. That is one thing, and then the type, and then we have put up whether to use the color red. And then the next one would be, now we can see here, right? We have specified different sizes. So when it comes to this, let me check, right? So here is the border. We have 2 pixels. So we can simply say, okay, 5 pixels. Let me save, refresh. So you can see the size, right? And if you just say border without anything, here is how, let's say solid, refresh. Okay, so we have a solid border, 5 pixels. Now, here we will say border width. Then you don't have to say solid. You can simply say, okay, border width, refresh. And then we can talk about 5 pixels, the solid. And then we can also have medium. And then border width with different values. Let me put 2 pixels. So 2 pixels in every side. And then let's put 10 pixels. And then let's say 4 pixel. And finally 20 pixels. So let's say double width. So the shorthand notation for this is we can have border, and then we can specify what colors you want to have. So for example, here we can say 5 pixel, solid and red will tell us exactly how the border look like. And when you have 4 values like in earlier, let me check again. 2 pixels, 10 pixels, 4 pixels, and 20 pixels. So let me check. It's not working. 2 pixels is working. Right. So let's put 5 pixels. So I don't want to confuse too much on this. You can check. Yeah, earlier, yeah, my spellings were the mistake here. Thanks, Prasan. Right, next, let's move on to shorthand property. This is what we have discussed. Then the corners, for example, let's say if you need sometimes the rounded corners, you can also specify border radius. So in this particular case, if you use border radius, let's say 12 pixel, you can have more rounded, borders. So depend on how much curvature that you want to use, you can change this value. So let me just check. So in this case, border radius. Is save. And let's check. So you can see. Yes, now you have rounded corners. You see rounded corner, you can see it's 12 pixel we have specified in case if you need rounded corners. Right, now the margins. Now, especially the margins are very important, especially when you want to make the spacing, when we are aligning with other elements. So the margin values can be given. You can give top, right, and bottom and left. And then you can also use different lengths. For example, you can specify margin in pixels, the points, the centimeters. And even you can use percentage values based on the percentage value of the width of the element. Or you can actually inherit the margins from any parent elements. Right, now let's look at some examples. The first one is we are using margin. So for example, the first one, we specify margin of top margin, right, bottom, and left. And then when you say 3 values, usually we can talk about 25. Then top 25, both right and left 50, and then bottom 75. So let's check this. Let me put margin. The right now, what I'm going to do is I will use another H2, right? And then let's try to change the margin. So I will copy paste this one. So I will specify class as M. let me put .m to specify the class. So let me save and let me refresh. So it's looks the same. So let's put up some margin information. Margin, let's say 25 pixels, 50 pixels, 75 pixels, and 100. Let me see whether we can see this. So you can see here, it specify, spacing, and then you can also see the spaces, 25 pixels from the top, and then right we have 50 pixels, then 50 pixels, and the left we have 75, and sorry, bottom you have 75, and then left you have 100. You have 100 pixels, so which is why it looks like this. So this is providing margins. Now if you just put 25 each, so let me check 25. So you can see there was some spacing here as well. So spaces are given, and then and everywhere it looks the same. So we can change this. So let me put margin 1, margin 2. So let me copy paste the same thing, right? And let me put this as M2 and this is M1. So the class M1, and then this is M1 and M2. I'm going to change it for previous one. So we will put up top, then right, then bottom, and the left. So now two margins with the two classes. So if I refresh it, now you can see how it looked like. So the margins were changed. So depend on how we actually put the elements. Okay, so that's about the margins. Then the next thing is we can also use the padding. Now, padding is the space in from the element and what is inside when you define the border. So the border, we know that it's aligned this, and you can provide some padding values, top, right, bottom, and left, like in previous case, right? So now let's put it in this way. So let me put padding as well, like in earlier. So I'm going to get back to my code. Right, here is what I have. So let me put padding, another class, let's say P1. So let me put 25 pixel padding, right? And then let's say this one, right? So for example, the first one, I will have M1 and P1. So I'm going to apply two classes here. So let's see what will happen now when you refresh. Okay, so now you can see here. So we have padding, that is what is inside. Now here there's no padded. So same 25 pixels around this. So it's the same, right? Similarly, if I put P2, I'm going to get the same thing, but make it as a P2 for the padding. So let me put P2. And then let me apply into the second one, P2. So M2, P2. So I'm applying two classes here. So let me refresh. Okay. Padding was not. So let me put M2P1. Yeah. So padding, let me check. Yeah. So usually you should be able to have the similar way, but yeah. Should it work? Okay, so it says margin. So this is the problem. So we have padding, right? So that was the error. So let's put P2 and see the difference. Okay, so now you can see how it has actually changed the padding as well. So padded, that means the content. Now without padding, you can see now the content is fixed into the frame. But when you padded, within that you'll have some spacing. Now here we have 4 spaces we have put up with padding. So we have top 25. So top is 25, same as the previous one. And then right, you have 50. So this side you have 50. And then bottom you have 75. And here the left you have 100 pixels. So you can see how it is spaced when it comes to padding as well. Now, this will give you now as the setting for the what we call the box model. Any element that we are going to have, right? Usually we can talk about in CSS what we call the box model. So let's look at the box model now. Now, given that we know any HTML or all HTML elements, we can have arranged in what we call the box model. So anything that you have actually used, you can talk about, there's a border, which is what you have the margin, sorry, border of we will be the, then within that you have the content, but the spacing is what we call the padding, and what is outside from the border, what we call the margin. So this is the control. Now, when you visualize something, because every element in the page, right? So you can see this rectangle box, which you can actually use it, right? And this is very, very important, that how you actually make use of this, right? With that, we can get the visual appeal with the box model. Right, now, for example, a div is a general element that we can use. Usually, div is what we have, right? And in this example, let's say we specify div, and within that, we can have this, text, and let's say we specify this information, right? Okay, so I can ask a small question based on the values were given. So what is the total width of the element? So what is the total width of the elements, including everything? Can you calculate and see based on the values are given here? So if you remember what we have discussed it here, so what do you mean by width here? The dimension, right? So when you talk about the dimension, you have to talk about the border. You have to talk about the padding, and you have to talk about the width of whatever the content. So that is what we call the width. So depend on what you are given here. So can you tell me what is the width? So you can check the border here. So we have the border size, and then we have a padding, right? Then we have the width, again padding, right? Then you have border, isn't it? So what is the border? Border is 25 pixels. Okay. Plus, what is the padding? 25, right? So we have border, that is 25, padding 25, 25, 25, 50. Width is 300. Okay, 350 plus again padding 25 plus another 25, right? Calculate and see, isn't it? Because width is given 300, so this length is 300. We have 25, 25. But if you're taking, for example, margin, then we can say total width, right? Because it's the outside of this border. Like if you take the total, if I say that total width, then yes, you have to use margin as well. So starting from the margin, then if you say total width, okay, then starting with the margin, you have 25 pixels, then border 25 pixels, padding 25 pixels, width 300, again 25, padding 25, border 25, margin. So without margin, it's 400, but with margin, that is the total width. Usually we have to talk about everything together. It should be 450. Okay, got the point?
Doctor, is that margin also adding into the element of?
Sorry, Prasanga, what was your question?
Doctor, I have a question that when you're thinking about the element, that margin also is the part of the element. Is that the question? Because that margin is that element is positioning about related to whatever the another element, no?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So when you just say width, yeah, you may exclude margin. But when you say the total width including the margin, because the box model, when you say, so this is how any element, right? We have everything now. That's what we say. All HTML elements can be considered the boxes, and box will contain margin, border, padding, content, everything together. So the box model, what we say, any element, you have all these. So when you say total width, we have to consider the margin as well.
Okay, thank you.
But of course, yes, the content will be this. But when you added up all this padding, border, and margin, you will get the total width of the element. When you say element, element includes the margin as well. Right. Okay. So let's move to the text properties. Usually color, we already discussed about the CSS text. We also discussed like the three different ways of representing the color. And usually a common property that we will use with the text is the align property, which is used to set horizontal alignment of the text. We can use to say center, left, right, and also to justify. And then you can also use decoration. Now this text decoration, none, this property and value we normally use to remove underline in the links. When we have links, we can say, okay, text decoration is right. Now, let me quickly show you that, because we normally use this. So let me quickly go to what we have. Let's have a link. Okay. Let me refresh. So you can usually see the underline. So let me say a anchor text decoration, none. We have text decoration none property. And when you refresh, now you can see we can remove the underline here, which is very nice. Sometimes we want to avoid that, especially this is used when you want to represent uh, the text or a link as buttons. We can make use of this information where we can remove the underline. Okay, next, text transform property. We can specify, for example, how it should appear. For example, we can say uppercase, lowercase, capitalize. For example, let's put text transform in our case, right? Yeah. So text transform. Let's put uppercase. Hope it is working. So you can say link to page, so that we can change it to uppercase letters. Then fonts. Now, especially font usage is very, very important, and how these fonts are used in websites. Now, especially use of font property and also use of fonts are very important, because that affects how you look and feel of your web page, right? Now, the first thing that we need to discuss about when it comes to fonts is font family. Font family is what typeface we are going to use, and usually we can talk about different fonts, different types, right? So generic family, a group of fonts, similar look, serif and monospace. Now, when you say serif, you can see that they are more preferred for reading. And especially when you want to have large fonts, especially in headers, we will prefer without these serifs. The red colors one are serifs. So with that, we can use no serifs. In other words, we say sans serif, right? So depend on that, we may use different usage. Now, if you look at the serif fonts, which is normally reading fonts or small fonts, we will use Times New Roman. Georgia is some of the serif fonts. Sans serif, Arial, and Veradana, especially which is important for headers. And then you can have monospace, which is usually same with characters, especially when you want to represent like program code and something. We usually use these type of fonts. So proper font usage is very important when you are setting up pages. Now, font family means usually we talk about this. We are going to have several fonts. Now, for example, usually the font family will read it out like this. You have Times New Roman, Times Sans Serif, which indicates that if the browser is not supporting the first font, then it tries the next font and so on. So whenever you want to make it, present your web page in a unique way, you make sure that your fonts are properly loaded. So therefore, in worst case scenario, you have to specify if that particular font is missing in the system, it should present with the other font, right? So the recommendation is whenever you specify the fonts, you start with whatever the fonts you want. And at the end, it should be some generic family, which means that it should be available, right? It should be available. So that is how we normally specify what families we are going to use. Right. So, for example, now we have what we call web fonts, although sometimes early days we were limited with whatever the fonts available within the system. Now things have changed, right? So since the page is display in different browsers, so unique representation very important, right? So the two problems usually when we want to include fonts with the web pages, the browser, the support for these fonts. So there are different formats usually we will use, for example, open type or OTF, or sometimes true type we call TTF. But early days, we also have different the versions as well, right? Now, the new format that we will use for these fonts is what we call web open font format. And then the font file we can deliver with the web. So the newest version, we allow that, any font is available as a web font, right? So, yeah, so make sure that when you are using very particular font, in worst case, if the system couldn't find your particular font, you presented with other types of fonts already available. Right. About the other properties of the fonts, now other than the font name, we can talk about font style. For example, how it should look like, whether it's normal, italic, and oblique. And font size, the size of the font. Usually we prefer to use pixels, which is the representation. But then we can also have relative font size. We use relative font size with the EM. Now, usually remember the default current font size is normally we will say 1 million, right? So if we specify what name is, normal browsers the font size in pixels is about 16 pixels. So the in default, we can talk about 1 EM is about like 16 pixels. So if you want to calculate this, the default, absolute size with the relative size, you can always, the value you can divide by 16 and then you can get the value. So for example, in previous example, I have put two sizes, 40 and 2.5. So they are the same sizes. So this is the size in pixels. Now, if you divide 40 by 16, you will get 2.5 here. So both ways we are representing this pixel 40 as a font size. Right. The next is about the links, and then what we can say is in a links, we can also work on the different states of the links. Now, for example, when you want to do something about a normal unvisited link, we can specify a colon link. And when you visited the link, we can talk about a visitor. When you when you move over the link, we call a hover. And then when you click on that particular link, we can say active. So for all these, we can specify how things are represented. You can change the properties and so on. Right, now here's another example just to show you different the values given here. For example, here we will have unvisited link. A link is red color. And then when you visit, then we set the color is green. Then when you mouse over the links, we change the color into hot pink. And when it's active, we will say blue. And then, for example, if you don't want to show you the underline, when you create a link and visit it, we can say text decoration is none. And when you go on to top, we can say text decoration is underlined, which means when you move on top of the link, it will display the underline. And when you visit it, we will say background is yellow. And then when you are active, we are going to use light green. Right. So let's try this. I'm going back to my. So here is what I have. So we have already created a link. So let me change that. So I'm going to say a link, a colon link. And then I'm going to say, okay, color is red. So refresh it. You can see the color is red now. We have not yet clicked it. When you click, let's change the color. So for that, we can say a visitor. Color, we will say green. So when you visit, let me change, click. Right, we can make it a green then. When you visit it, then when you go over it, we can change the color to hot pink. Right, you can see when I move it, the color will be changed. So the color is now change it to hot pink. Right. When you're selecting the link, we can say a active. Let me say color is blue. So you won't see it, but yes, when you click it, you just see it. Okay, so now you see when you click it, it'll blue color, right? So you can change. Right now this link could be created as a button, especially with the use, right? Now, for example, let me show you how we can do this. So the buttons are very useful, especially when you want to create link. Let me save this as a CSS3, and then I'm going to remove a lot of unwanted text. Yeah, this is CSS3. So let me remove everything, the styles, so I can start from the beginning, right? So right now, yeah, I will remove everything except the 2 lines, right? That's all I have. Okay, let me double click it. So this is what I have. Okay, now I want you to discuss how we can convert this link into a button. And then, yeah, you can, use it as a link button, right? So let me put style here within this, let's say style, style, right? Now within this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change, anchor. So for example, we can talk about, background colors. So let's say background color. You can specify any color. So let me use some red colors. This is there. And let me refresh it. So you can see now how it look like. And then let me change the color of the text as white. So no change, but we change it to color. Let's give some padding so that, it looks like a button. So let's put up some padding. We discussed earlier about padding it. I'm going to give you 14 pixels and 25. This now we can see it like this. Text alignment. Let's make it to a center. And let's decoration. Let's move it to none. Right. So you can see it. Plus finally how it should be displayed. I'm going to say inline block. Right. So that when you have inline block, what happens, you will have the space. So you can see now it looks really nice and then looks like a button, right? So this is how we can use, CSS to change the look and feel, and it looks like a button now, right? Okay. Okay, so with that, now we can move on the list and the other things. So let me quickly talk about, for example, the lists, right? I will copy paste the code so that you can try this. Let me copy paste in your chat so that you can, try and see, you can update and so on. Right. The next one, lists. Now, the lists we already discussed from HTML that we can use ordered list as well as unordered lists. Now, for example, let me create some list here after anchor. Let me create some unordered list. So we start with unordered list and then with unordered list. So let's have some list items. Coffee list item, and then another list item, let's say tea. Right. Another list item, let's say Coca-Cola, right? Right. This is how usually list appear. Now, change of this, the marker, especially in unordered list, can be done with UL property. So instead of here, I can change UL and then I can introduce what style marker that I have to use. So for example, I can say list style type. For example, when you say circle, yes, we can refresh it. You can change that. And then, yeah. So you can change it the way it looks like. Even you can use some small image instead of the. So in case if you want to have image, then you have to use what we call list style image property to change that, right? So let me check some so let's first download some small image. I'm trying to find some image to start with. So let's create a small graphic. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a very small graphic just so that I can actually take as a marker. Right, so I mark it at 30 by 30 pixel. So let's draw so we put up a marker. Let's save that. So I'm going to make it PNG. So I mark it as star. Right now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change it to style. So let me. So here is what I have right now. So in the code, now what I'm going to do instead of that, I'm going to have CSS. Using that, I will put the change. So right now, instead of this one, let me use list style image URL. Let's say images star.png. So let me save it, refresh it. Yes, you can see now customarily what I have changed is the image that we have created. Now we have put up as the list. Okay, right. So that's about the lists. And one of the things is you can actually decide the list position as well. Sometimes we can position it so that this is outside, or you can make it inside as well. So depend on your requirement, you can use it. Then if you want to remove, sometimes I think when we create the very first web page, we use the list to list down the items, but sometimes we want to remove the marker. So for example, in that particular case, if you say list style type none, right, list style type, it's you say none. Now you can see here that the markers are actually removed. Sometimes this is very, very important when you want to list an items, especially the content wise, but you want to use it as, okay. For example, menus. When we want to present menus, we can use it them as a list, but we don't need any markers. So use list style type to none so that you can remove it. And another thing that you can do is you can remove any margin and padding as well. So what you could do is if you are removing this, at the same time, you can have margin. Margin, you can put it to 0. Similarly, padding as well. You can make it to 0. Right? So you can see the additional space that you can remove by doing so. Right? Additional spacing that you can remove by putting margin and padding into 0. Right. There was a question on Prasanga about why use of single line property. Yes, as correctly said Prasanga, you can get a small advantage of loading size. Although it is not much, you can have a very compact representation, especially when you put up into a single line. So most of the time you will see we will have a shorthand properties used. But when you are a beginner, yes, you need to exactly know what you are doing. So my recommendation in the beginning, you can go into details, but when you get familiar, you can change the style so that it will save some space as well, right? Because the size matters. So although it's very small, so you can, write a compact style sheet. Okay, so let's move to the next part then. We are going to talk about the table properties. So let me change into tables. Right, now tables, we know usually in HTML structure, we will have table and then we will use tr, th, td to represent them. But the border, usually we don't specify border when you are creating a table. So that we can represent using style sheets. So we can say that table, th and td. We can say that it's 1 pixel solid line. Now, when you do that, one of the things you have to notice that you will see double lines, which is the borders are separated, and you can see that them as a there are several borders. So using the border collapse property, we can make it to 1. Okay, let me start with that one. Okay, so here is what we have. Let's take the table. I will create a table within this. So if I use the table, we discuss, we start with the table and we will end with the slash table. And then let's say we have 3 rows. So basically we can have 3 TRs, and then we can have headers, th. We have first name, last name, and then yeah, so we can have td/td/td. So what we have is the first name, let's say Peter Griffin. So this is from the, then similarly I can copy paste this one, and then we can say Lois. Right, this is what we have. When you refresh it, okay, so here is it look like. You see now, yeah, so the border property is very important. So let's put up that borders. So we can say table, th, td. For everything, for all the 3, we can specify, okay, border should be 1 pixel, solid and black. So when you refresh it, yeah, so it looks like this. So yeah, let me remove this. Maybe I will save it as CSS4. So let me open up. Okay, so here is what I have. So let me remove everything and I'm going to keep only the table. Right, now here is what I have. Now you can see you have double lines here, mainly because of you have separate borders. Let's ask it to put into a single border. So to ask it into putting it to a single border, we can use border collapse. With the property value collapse, which now you should see okay, so that we will put under the table. So under that, you will see now it look like a single border. So which is usually you will see when you're creating tables. Okay, right. So that's about the table properties. We can also change the table widths and the heights. You can specify it either using percentage value like 100%, or you can use pixel values. And then for example, the text alignments, we can also discuss about how you align the text, whether you are going to align it to left, right, or the center, so that you can actually specify. Similarly, you can vertically align the elements like top, bottom, or middle. So that vertical alignment also could be useful depending on what content you have in the table. Right. Now let's look at some styles, especially when you interact with the table. For example, we can, when you move mouse over the tables, we can talk about, change of this. So for example, we can see when you move on, we can make the color change. So that we can specify. Now, for example, in this particular case, let's say the row wise, we can say, okay, table row, when you rate, we will change the background color, right? So simply I will use hex code F5, 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 right? So simply what happens now, when you actually move over the rows, you can see there's a change of colors. Maybe I don't know whether it's very clearly visible to you. Yeah, maybe I can put red. Refresh it. Yeah. Okay. Now you can see it clearly. So you can actually, make it more interactive by changing the background color into red when over the table rows. And this also could be used to represent naturally in every other, in every other row, if you want to like make a change of color. So that is also possible. So the trick that we can actually use is we can say tr. We are going to say n child. In this particular case, what we are trying to do is every line we can specify a color. So even so we can specify different background color. So background. So let's say hash f2 f2 f2. So if you do like that, and if you refresh it, so you can see there's a color difference. So I don't know whether it's visible to you. Let me put yellow here instead of that. Yeah. You see. So let me increase the number of rows. Yes. So if you refresh it, you can see. So hoovering is working here as well, but in this particular case, or the even rows, we will make it the color. In this particular case, I set it to yellow, right? So this is normally what you will see. Right. Okay. Let's talk about the CSS layout details. Now, display, we normally, if you have, depend on what elements you have. We will talk about two types of elements. First, what we call the block level element, like headers, like paragraph, which create separate elements and we'll have spaces, right? Usually the block level elements start with a new line. Now, and then we have some inline elements, which is, it will not create a separate line, like bold, for example, like anchor, like image. So the generic inline element is what we call this pad. So then it's with whatever the element that we will use. So what we could do is we can hide some elements. For example, we can say, for example, H1, we can say hidden, we can say display none, right? So the trick that is, especially in JavaScript, we will discuss in coming sessions, we can use to make it more interactive. We are not going to delete anything, but we just hide, right? So there are two ways to hide element. One is you can use display none. The other one is visibility hidden. But there's a small, difference. When you say element is hidden, the space is not allocated. But when you use visibility hidden, then you will have the space. Right, let's see the example. So I'm going to get my code. So let's open up what we have right now. Okay, so we have H1s, right? So let me copy paste this H1 multiple times. Okay, so I have copied 3 times. Let me make it, this is H2, this is H2, and then this is H3. We have 3 level headers now, H1, H2, and H3. So let's take H2. Let's say hidden. So now what we do is we say display, the property we set it to none. See what happens now. So here is what I have right now. When you refresh, you will see. Okay, H2 hidden and display none. So let me check. Okay, so the problem I had is I forgot to put class here. So I will say hidden. Right, so right now it should work. So it should be H2 dot, yes. So you see what happens now. It will not take any space for this, and it actually, it's gone, right? So no space actually taken for this. Now, the next one that I would like to discuss is visibility hidden. Now, if you use visibility hidden, now what happens here is instead of display none, if you say visibility. So now see what will happen when you refresh. There's a space still for that. Previously, we say H2. So it's hidden, but this still the space is allocated. So to conclude that one, what you need to remember is there are 2 ways we can actually hide elements. One, display none. When you display none, it will just hide, no space actually taken. But if you use visibility hidden, basically it will hide the element, but the same space is allocated. So depend on what you need, you have to use one of these. Right. The next thing that I want to discuss is the layout, right? So for example, in this particular case, we want to use them as inline. So what happens when you say inline? Yes, usually in block element, you will have a space, right? And then when you say inline elements, so there's no space in between. So the list item, we will say display inline. And if you take anchor, usually there's no space. But when you say display as a block, then it will create a block. So which we have seen in the button case as well. When we say display block, it will actually change how it actually lay out it, right? So depend on whether you want to keep it as an inline or block is your decision, but you can change it by changing display either inline or block element. Okay, now let's look at the layouting. And I think this is the very interesting part, and which we are going to discuss, especially positioning of your pages, the images, and the multimedia content, right? Since we are running out of time, let me quickly discuss the basics of layout, and we'll finish for today. Now, the first layouting, what we need to understand is the position elements. And usually we talk about 5 different positions. So we can talk about static, relative, fixed, absolute, and sticky. And then when you are positioning, you can use top, bottom, and left and right. So the first thing is you have to set the position property. And then based on that, we can use different positioning values. Right, now starting with the static, we start with static, and that is the default. So what static means, the element will not affect with top, bottom, left, and right properties. So when you say position is static, it position in a normal way. So we say div.static. So that means we are going to have a static class, and position we say static, and there's a border. Okay, last one. An element with position relative is position relative to its normal position. Setting up the top, right, bottom, and left properties of a relative position element will cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position. Okay, I think with that, we can conclude our today's session. So today, we also go on and discuss in bit detail how CSS different rules are used to prepare our presentation. What we have missed for today's session is how you are going to handle when you have a website, and how you are going to apply CSS rules for these, right? So that part I'm going to discuss in the next class.